The 10 greatest playoff runs in NBA history by net wins. The playoffs legacies are where legacies are made and unmade. Every serious basketball conversation eventually arrives here, not what a player did in February, but what he did when it mattered. Net wins gives us a way to measure that contribution with precision. Not rings, not raw scoring totals, not narrative, but actual share of team wins produced across an entire postseason. One honest caveat before the list begins. The modern NBA playoffs produce more wins than the early NBA did. A 16-team bracket with 4 rounds generates up to 16 wins for a champion. The 1949 playoffs generated 8. More wins means more net wins available to distribute, and the formula reflects that reality without apologizing for it. George Mikan's 1948-49 postseason, 10 games, 6.2 net wins across an 8-win Minneapolis run would top this list by raw number. He was the most dominant player of his era, and it shows. But a 10-game playoff run and a 24-game playoff run are not the same achievement, and treating them as equivalent would distort the comparison rather than clarify it. What follows is the top 10 from the post-expansion era, with full acknowledgement of where the legends of earlier decades fit. Number 1, Tim Duncan, 2002-2003 Spurs, 5.8 net wins, 24 games, 16 wins, 24.7 points, 15.4 boards, 5.3 assists. The 2003 Spurs were not a glamorous team. They were methodical, disciplined, and entirely built around Duncan's ability to control both ends of the floor without requiring anything stylistically exciting from him. He did not need to be exciting. He needed to be dominant. And across 24 playoff games, he was the most dominant player in the field. The Spurs swept the first 3 rounds, winning 12 of those 15 games, with Duncan accounting for a larger share of their net actions than almost any player in the modern era has managed over a full postseason. The finals against the Nets went 6 games. Duncan averaged a near triple-double for the entire run. He was 27 years old and at the absolute center of everything the Spurs did. 5.8 net wins. The highest single postseason total in the database for the modern era, the greatest playoff run the formulas ever measured. Number 2, LeBron James, 2011-2012 Heat, 5.4. 23 games, 16 wins, 30.3 points, 9.7 rebounds, 5.6 assists. LeBron had just come through the worst professional year of his life. The 2011 finals, his first with Miami, had produced a performance so tentative, so uncharacteristic, that it had reshuffled the entire public conversation about who he was and whether he could deliver when everything else was on the line. The questions were fair. His play in that series had been genuinely diminished in the closing moments that mattered most. His answer came in 2012. He averaged 30.3 points and 50% shooting across 23 games. It was never anything other than the best player on the floor. The 5.4 net wins represent a season in which he did not just lead his team to the playoffs, but controlled the postseason at a level that the formula identifies as historic. The finals against Oklahoma City with Durant, Westbrook, and Harden went 5 games. This was the run that permanently closed a conversation about whether LeBron James could perform in the biggest moments. He answered with the second greatest postseason in net wins database. Number 3, Shaquille O'Neal, 99-2000 Lakers. 23 games, 15 wins, 30.7 points, 15.4 rebounds, 3.1 assists. Shaq in 2000 was a force the sport had not seen since Wilt Chamberlain. He was 7'1", 330-plus pounds and operating at a level of physical dominance that no opposing center could approach. Lakers went 15-8 in the playoffs. They swept Portland in Game 7. On a second-half comeback that remains one of the most dramatic moments in franchise history, and they went on to beat Indiana in 6 in the finals. The 5.3 net wins are built on numbers that look almost impossible: 30.7 points per game on 57% shooting, 15.4 rebounds, and the kind of defensive presence that forced opposing coaches to construct entire game plans around how to survive him. They mostly could not. This was the first of 3 consecutive championships. The 2000 run was the peak of the physical dominance. Number 4, Nikola Jokic, 2022-23 Nuggets. 20 games, 16 wins, 30 points, 13.4 rebounds, 9.5 assists. Jokic won the championship that everyone who watches basketball closely had been expecting since roughly 2021. The Nuggets went wire to wire through the bracket without a serious stumble. His 9.5 assists per game across 20 playoff games is a number that belongs in a different sport. A center averaging nearly a triple-double across an entire postseason run in a playoff field that included LeBron, Durant, Curry, and Anthony Davis. His 5.1 net wins reflect the completeness of his contribution. He was not just scoring, he was the engine of everything Denver did offensively. He was a plus rebounder against every center he faced, and he produced at this level across 4 rounds without a game in which he looked like anything other than the best player on the floor. The formula loves versatility. Jokic might be the most versatile player it has ever encountered. Number 5, LeBron James, 2012-13 Heat. 23 games, 16 wins, 25.9 points, 8.4 rebounds, 6.6 assists, back-to-back. The 2013 run is remembered for the finals against San Antonio, specifically Game 6, Ray Allen's corner 3 with 5.2 seconds left, the save that preserved the season. LeBron's 4.9 net wins across the run reflect what he did for the preceding 22 games, an efficient, comprehensive postseason performance from the best player alive. He averaged 25.9 points on 49% shooting with 6.6 assists. 2 top 5 postseasons in consecutive years, the formula simply confirming what anyone who watched understood. This was tied with Dwayne Wade's 05-06 Heat. 4.9 net wins, 23 games, 16 wins, 28.4 points, 5.9 rebounds, 5.7 assists. Wade was 24 years old. He had Shaquille O'Neal as a teammate, but Shaq was no longer the player he had been in Los Angeles. Older, heavier, operating at a reduced level that Wade had to compensate for in almost every series. Against Dallas in the finals, he averaged 34.7 points and shot 24 free throws per game. He was the best player in the 2006 playoffs and the engine of the championship rather than its beneficiary. So that's part of a 3-way tie for 5th. We'll get to that in a second and confirm something the traditional box score only partly captures. This was not Shaq's last ring with a capable young co-star. This was Wade's championship, delivered at an age when most players are still learning what the playoffs require. So the third tied at 5th was Hakeem Olajuwon, the 93-94 Rockets. 23 games, 15 wins, 28.9 points, 11 boards, 4.3 assists, 1.7 steals, 4 blocks. The summer of 94 was the summer Michael Jordan retired for the first time. The Eastern Conference title was contested between the Knicks and the Pacers, both average teams by the standard of great playoff years. The real basketball was being played in the West, where Hakeem was doing things no center in the league could approximate. His 4 blocks per game across 23 playoff games is a number that defies repetition. He was playing defense on the perimeter, post defense, simultaneously, and scoring 28.9 points on an array of footwork moves that are still studied and still largely unreproducible. The finals against the Knicks went 7 games, one of the great physical series in NBA history, and Hakeem was the difference in almost every game that mattered. Number 8, LeBron James, 2019-20 Lakers, 4.8 net wins, 21 games, 16 wins, 27.6 points, 10.8 rebounds, 8.8 assists. The bubble. No crowds, no road disadvantage, no home advantage, just basketball in a controlled environment in Orlando. LeBron was 35 years old and producing one of the most complete statistical playoff runs of his career. The 4.8 net wins reflect rebounds and assists that pushed the formula significantly. He was operating as a point forward in the truest sense, a player who rebounds at the level of power forward and distributes at the level of an elite point guard and scored at the level of a scoring wing. The finals against Miami went 6 games. Anthony Davis added 4.3 net wins of his own, giving the Lakers 2 players in the top 30 of the all-time single-season postseason list in the same run. LeBron's 4 appearances in the top 10 of this list are unprecedented. No other player appears more than twice. Number 9, Dirk Nowitzki, 2005-06 in Mavericks, 4.7. 23 games, 14 wins, 27 points, 11.7 rebounds, 2.9 assists. Dallas reached the finals in 2006 as favorites. They had the best player in the building and the better team on paper. They lost. Wade's performance in the closing games was historic, and the Mavericks were unprepared for it. Dirk's 4.7 net wins across this run reflect the genuine best of his career postseason performance that ended in the wrong result. 5 years later, in a rematch against Miami, he won. The 2011 Dirk produced 4.2 net wins, another top 20 all-time finish. His sustained playoff excellence across 2 different championship runs with the same franchise is one of the cleaner lines of the modern era. And this was tied with Kawhi Leonard 2018-2019 Raptors at 4.7, 24 games, 16 wins, 30.5 points, 9.1 rebounds, 3.9 assists. Series against Philadelphia will always be the image. The 4 bounces on the rim, the arena erupting, an entire country's basketball season ending on a single shot. But Kawhi's 2019 run was more than just one moment across 24 games and 16 wins. He averaged 30.5 points on 49% shooting. He locked down Kevin Durant for the stretch of the finals when Durant was available. He covered Giannis for the portions of the Eastern Conference Finals where coverage mattered most. The 4.7 net wins are built on defensive contributions that the formula captured through steals and blocks, but that in his case extend further than those raw numbers suggest. He was, those 24 games, the best two-way player on the planet. Next is Michael Jordan, 96-97 Bulls. 19 games, 15 wins, 31.1 points, 7.9 rebounds, 4.8 assists. His 96-97 postseason is often overshadowed by the season itself. 69 wins, the flu game, the rivalry with Utah that defined the decade, but 4.7 net wins across 19 games and 15 wins placed at the top of Jordan's own postseason catalog, just ahead of his 91, 92, and 93 runs, which all came in at 4.6. What the formula reveals about Jordan's playoff career is the consistency. He produced between 4.6 and 4.7 net wins in 5 separate postseason runs. No other player in the database shows that kind of sustained output across multiple championship runs. LeBron has higher peaks, but Jordan's floor across his championship years is extraordinary. So where did this year's finals fit? The 25-26 postseason offers a useful frame of reference. Karl Anthony Towns led all players with 3.1, followed by Victor Wembanyama and Jalen Brunson at 3 each, OG at 2.7, and Shea at 2.3. These are strong numbers. Towns' 3.1 on 15.9 points, 10.6 rebounds, and 4.9 assists reflects a player who contributed across every dimension of the game in a 16-win postseason run. Wemby's 3 at age 22, 23.8 points, 10.9 rebounds, 3.5 blocks per game is the kind of performance that signals what the next decade of basketball, playoff basketball, may look like. Brunson at 3.0 on 28.4 points per game was the engine of the Knicks offense for 4 rounds, but 3.1 is not 5.8, it's not 5.4 or 5.3. The gap between this year's best performance and Duncan's 2003 run is not a reflection on Towns or Wemby. It reflects how far the greatest postseason runs in history separated their authors from the competition around them. Duncan in 2003 produced nearly twice the net wins of the best player at this year's field. Duncan in 2012 did the same. That kind of separation from contemporaries is what makes those runs historic rather than merely excellent. Towns, Wembanyama, and Brunson had excellent postseasons. The players above them on the list had something rare. For the record, the greatest postseason runs by the pre-expansion legends. Kareem's best playoff run by net wins was the 1973-74 Milwaukee season with 4.2 across 16 games. Wilt Chamberlain's was his 66-67 with Philadelphia at 4.2 across 15 games. Russell's best was the 65-66 season, 3.8 across 17 games. Larry Bird peaked at 4 in the 1986 run. Magic at 3.8 in the 87-88 run. These numbers are compressed by error, fewer rounds, fewer wins available, smaller margins for the formula to work with. Russell won 11 championships. His playoff net wins per run looked modest because he was doing it in a bracket that produced 8 wins for a champion instead of 16. Adjusting for error and bracket size would move all these players substantially higher. What the formula could say with confidence, Duncan in 03, James in 2012, and Shaq in 2000 produced the 3 greatest single postseason performances in the modern era by this measure. The greatest players from earlier generations produced at comparable rates in smaller brackets. The greatest postseason ever played may have belonged to George Mikan in a format we can no longer meaningfully compare. What we can measure, we have measured. The rest is history. Net wins measures a player's contribution to their team's wins based on their share of positive and negative actions relative to teammates. Playoff net wins are calculated using the same formula applied to postseason box scores. Net wins is an original statistic developed at netwins.substack.com. The formula and all written content are original works, all rights reserved. Database located at willf123 at github.io/NBA-net-wins.